Hello everyone. So here I'm going to do the first session about introduction to logic. So here you can exhibit, you can improve your ability to reaching the conclusions through the premises, and just to explain the different definitions of logic. And here I'm going to discuss the nature of subject matter of logic and definitions of logic, and the history of logic in Western and the Eastern. So after this session, you have to understand the nature of the subject matter by a means of logical definitions, and then you have to describe the historical development of logic through the ages, and compare the manner in which the development of Western and Eastern logic took place. So, as a first session, so I'm going to define the logic, because logic is, one can say, a study about arguments, but logic is the subject that the methods and principles used to distinguish correct from incorrect reasoning. So then one can say a logic is study about arguments, and so then what is an argument? So when we reasons about any matter, so we produce arguments to support the conclusions. So our arguments include reasons, and it means we need premises that we think justify our beliefs, right? So however, so not all reasons are good reasons, so therefore our duty is make correct reasoning. So therefore we may always ask, so when we confront an argument, so does the conclusion reached follow the premises to assumed correct conclusions? To answer this question, actually there are objective criteria, because in this study of logic we seek the discover and so apply those principles. So therefore one can say a logic is a study about methods and principles used to distinguish correct from incorrect reasoning. So right, so therefore a logic is a study about the methods and principles about correct reasoning. So then one can ask, so what is an argument? So argument is consist of the premises and the conclusions, right? So argument is a set of claims, so one of which is meant to be supported by others. So this is the basic argument. This is a very common argument in logic. So all men are mortal and Socrates is a man, so therefore Socrates is mortal. So here you can see the first two statements, all men are mortal and Socrates is a man. So these two statements we consider as a premises, and so these are basic elements of an argument. The first two statements considered as premises, and the last one is the conclusion, right? So then one can say a argument is consist of the premises and the conclusion. So right, so now you have two answers, like two answers for two questions. So what is logic and what is an argument? So if logic is study about reasoning, so if logic is a study about arguments, then argument is a set of claims. Argument is consist of premises and the conclusion. So those are statements, and those are declarative statements, right? So the argument system, it means the argument in logic, so we can divide it into two major categories. So that is inductive and deductive reasoning. So inductive arguments and deductive arguments. So here you can see deductive reasoning is the basis of formal logic. Abstract forms, which is concerned with the form of argument rather than its content. So at the same time, so in deductive argument, the conclusion cannot be wider than the premises. So the conclusion necessarily follows the premises, and their relationship is implication, or can be considered as entailment. So therefore the all humans is mortal and Socrates is human, so therefore Socrates is mortal. So the first two premises always derived the conclusions that Socrates is mortal. So that is necessarily follows from the given premises that all human is mortal and Socrates is human, because the Socrates is mortal is not something new. So that is exactly what the premises is about, right? So this is the deductive argument system that basically here argument is considered always the logical form, not the content, right? And I have there are so many other examples for this. This is the very basic example for that deductive argument. And so inductive reasoning is inference that something that finite and special number of cases or a particular cases to further case to make the general conclusion, right? So exactly we can say inductive reasoning is that something we associate with empirical facts or a concrete experience. So we considered most of the time the investigation of inferences of this sort of traditionally called inductive logic. So inductive logic is always investigate the process of drawing a probable conclusion. So that's important, and probable conclusion. And so another way stating this, inductive logic investigates the arguments in which the truth of the premises makes likely the truth of the conclusion. So inductive logic is very difficult and intricate subject because partly practitioners, it means experts of these disciplines, are not in complete agreement concerning what constitutes correct inductive reasoning. So inductive logic is not the subject that we explain always. Inductive reasoning is always very important to science. Okay, so what is this truth and validity? So truth is always attribute of a proposition, so that assert what really is the case. So what really is the case. So therefore, as example, I can say I assert the Colombo is the biggest city in Sri Lanka. So I assert what really is the case, right? So what is true if I had a claim that Hambantota is the biggest city in Sri Lanka? So my assertion would not be correct according to the real world, because the factual observations, and because therefore it would be false according to the real world and the factual components. But then according to have the explanation of truth and falsity, so we can say a truth is almost totally attributed to the propositions or factual reasoning. Okay, validity is, we discussed already, is that coming to correct conclusions according to premises. So validity is that coming to the correct conclusions according to premises. So here you have a question. So what is this correct conclusions? We are not going to consider about the content of the argument, because I'll take example, all quadrupeds have horns, rabbit is a quadruped, therefore rabbit has horns. So here you have a knowledge, because exactly rabbit doesn't have any horns, but you can understand exactly, but rabbit has horns here as a valid reasoning, because according to the premises, like the form of the premises, our conclusion is always correct, because they clearly mention that all quadrupeds have horns and rabbit is a quadruped. So therefore rabbit has horns exactly, because those premises always provide the evidence for the conclusions that we have to accept as a correct conclusion. So therefore exactly according to the premises the conclusion is correct, so that is valid. So but exactly the all quadrupeds have horns, that is not incorrect, that is not true. So all quadrupeds have horns is not true, but rabbit is the quadruped is true, right? So then our conclusion is rabbit has horns, so that's also not true. So here you can say exactly two statements are true but one is false. So therefore this is, we can consider it as a valid argument, but the details, sometimes the context is wrong, right? The factuality, there are some problems, but therefore we can say this is an unsound validity, right? But I can say at the same time that all men are mortal and Socrates is a man, so therefore Socrates is mortal. So that is actually valid argument, and also a sound valid argument, because the context is true. And I can take a very simple example that all rivers flow to the sea, and Mahavali is a river, so therefore Mahavali flows to sea. So this argument is actually deductively a valid argument, because the conclusion is correctly derived through premises, and at the same time the context, right? So all the rivers flow to the sea, so that is exactly true, and Amazon is a river, so then Amazon river is actually exactly the river, so we can accept as a river. So therefore we can say Amazon flows to sea. So therefore the argument is always, the context is correct according to the factual details and empirical facts, or you can say according to your concrete experience. If you can accept those statements as a true statements, so then you can accept the conclusion, the argument as a sound valid argument. But the argument that we discussed above, that all quadrupeds have horns and rabbit is a quadruped, so therefore rabbit has horns, the context is false but the argument is valid. So those type of arguments we consider as a unsound valid argument. Now you can understand that validity can be divided into two categories, that is sound validity and unsound validity. So that is exactly, we can understand that sound valid arguments are always have a true premises and the correct conclusion, and unsound validity, always incorrect premises and the valid argument, right? So if you can create yourself some sound and unsound validity, you can understand the knowledge about, you can test your knowledge, the knowledge about the sound validity and unsound validity. So you have to understand here exactly a deductive argument is said to be a valid, so when the inferences from premises to conclusion is perfect. So here are two equivalent way of starting the standard. I can say these two. I exactly can say if you can memorize these two statements correctly, so then you can understand whether those any argument, like whether they are valid or invalid, or a sound or unsound. If the premises of a valid argument are true, so then its conclusions must also be true, right? So that's exact. So it's impossible always for the conclusion of a valid argument to be false. So why its premises are true? So then I can say, so it's in a standard way. So in the case of a valid argument, so we may be sure only that if all the premises are true, then conclusion will be true. Definitions for logic, I can give three definitions, but you can find many if you want. And if you can memorize these definitions, it's very important for you to start your answers for the questions in part 1. And a logic is a science of correct thinking, and one can say a logic is a science of correctness or incorrectness of reasoning. And the other definition is logic is a systematic inquiry into the process of thinking. That the very famous definition is that logic is a science of distinguish a correct reasoning from incorrect reasoning. So these are the definitions that you have to memorize